In the fall of 1963, outside Dayton, Ohio, a father stood in a kitchen while the house was just waking up. The coffee was beginning to smell strong on the stove. One child was looking for a school shoe. His wife pulled open the silverware drawer and heard that old wooden scrape again. The drawer stuck halfway, just like it had all week. Today, most people would start thinking about replacement slides, cabinet parts, or a future kitchen remodel. But that morning, the father did not reach for a catalog. He opened the junk drawer, found a stub of paraffin wax left from canning season, and solved the problem with what was already in the house. That was the old way. Not reckless, not magical. Just household competence living in garages, basements, kitchen drawers, and coffee cans full of odd screws. Number 17 on this list kept old windows moving long after the paint and weather tried to freeze them shut. Number 9 was a measuring trick grandfathers trusted. And number 1 may be the real reason old houses seemed to stay in working order longer than many newer ones. These were not hacks. They were the quiet operating system of the old American home. Before we begin, one thing matters. This is history, memory, and practical household wisdom. Gas, wiring, roofs, structural damage, fire, vehicles, or serious plumbing belong with a qualified professional today. So here are 25 forgotten home repair tricks every father knew in the 1960s, from when people fixed more and wasted less. Number 25. The paraffin drawer glide. A stuck drawer was not always treated like a broken cabinet. Most of the time, an old father saw it for what it was: dry wood rubbing against dry wood. In many kitchens, especially in older houses, drawers ran on simple wooden runners. No ball bearings, no soft close track, just wood, dust, humidity, and use. When the drawer began to drag, a father would pull it out, turn it slightly in the morning light, and look for the places where the wood had gone shiny from friction. Then came the small block of paraffin, candle wax, or canning wax. He did not need much. The point was not to coat the whole drawer like a factory part. The point was to give the rubbing places a little help. A few passes along the runners could turn that rough scrape into a smooth wooden slide again. What made the trick powerful was not the wax. It was the diagnosis. He understood that the drawer had not failed. It was just asking for attention. That is how a lot of old homes lasted. People listened before they replaced. Number 24. The soaped screw. Every old workbench had a bar of soap that no one used for washing. It might be cracked, gray around the edges, and covered with sawdust. It lived near the coffee can of nails, or beside the hand drill. A father used it when a screw needed to go into stubborn wood without splitting the surface or fighting every turn. He would rub the screw threads across the dry soap before driving it into a small household job: a loose cabinet knob, a wooden latch, a shelf bracket, a little repair that did not involve anything structural or dangerous. The soap reduced friction. It helped the screw travel through old, hard wood instead of chewing its way in. That mattered in houses where trim, drawers, and shelves were made from real wood that had already spent decades drying and tightening. Today, a stripped screw or split board often sends people to the store for a replacement part. Back then, the first move was gentler. Make the old material cooperate. Do not bully it. That little bar of soap was not a shortcut. It was respect for wood. Number 23. The chalk high spot test. A sticky door can make a house feel tired. It drags in summer. It clicks in winter. It needs a hip bump to close.
A modern homeowner might immediately think the door is warped beyond saving. An old father often started with chalk. He would rub a little chalk on the edge of the door, close it carefully, then open it and look for the mark left behind where the door touched the frame. It was a simple way to find the high spot without guessing. That mattered because guessing ruined things. If a man shaved or sanded the wrong part of a door, he could create a new gap, a draft, or a latch that no longer met cleanly. The chalk told him where the door was actually complaining. The old trick was really a thinking trick. Find the rub before you reach for the tool. Listen to the material. Let the mark tell the story. That kind of taxation has almost disappeared from home repair, but it was once the difference between a door that lasted and a door that got replaced too soon. Number 22. The toothpick drawer pull repair. In a 1960s kitchen, a loose drawer pull did not automatically mean a new handle. Most of the time, the problem was smaller than that. The screw hole had gotten worn out. Years of children yanking the drawer, flour-covered hands pulling too hard, and the daily rhythm of the kitchen had made the little hole too wide to grip. Old fathers had a simple answer for small furniture and cabinet jobs. A sliver of clean wood, often a toothpick, gave the screw something to bite again. The goal was not to rebuild the drawer. It was to restore the grip inside a tired little hole.
This was the kind of repair that happened standing in the kitchen with breakfast still on the table. No big speech. No trip to the hardware store. Just a small correction that kept the old drawer working. Of course, this was for light household fixes, not load-bearing work, doors, railings, or anything safety-related. The old-timers knew the difference. That was part of the competence. They knew when a tiny fix was enough, and when it was not. Number 21. The coffee can hardware bank. Every old garage had at least one coffee can that weighed more than it looked. Inside were screws, washers, brads, old hinges, odd bolts, drawer pulls, hooks, nuts, thumbtacks, furniture glides, and little metal things no one could name until the exact day they were needed. To a child, it looked like junk. To a father, it was a parts department. The coffee can hardware bank worked because old homeowners did not throw away every leftover piece from a repair. If a hinge was removed from a broken cabinet, the screws stayed. If a screen door handle died, the washers stayed. If a shelf came down, the brackets might live another decade in the can. This habit saved more than money. It saved momentum. A Saturday repair could keep moving because the needed washer was not across town in a plastic package. It was on the shelf, under a film of dust, waiting for its second life. Today, homes are full of specialized products but short on remembered parts. That old coffee can was not clutter. It was household memory in metal form. Number 20. The folded card shim. A wobbly table, a rattling cabinet, or a picture frame that would not sit right did not always need a new part. Sometimes it needed a shim. Old fathers were masters of the almost invisible correction. A folded piece of card, a thin scrap of wood, a bit of stiff packaging, or a carefully cut sliver could take the shake out of something that annoyed the whole room. This was not glamorous repair. No one bragged about it. But it made daily life quieter. In older houses, nothing stayed perfectly square forever. Floors settled. Cabinets shifted. Wooden furniture moved with the seasons. A shim was a small agreement with reality. It said, "This house is old, this floor is not perfect, and we can still make things work." The modern instinct is often to demand replacement level perfection from every object. The old instinct was different. It aimed for service. If the table stopped rocking and the drawer stopped rattling, the job was done. There was wisdom in that. Not everything needs to be new. Some things just need to be made steady again. Number 19. The clothespin glue clamp. Before every home had a drawer full of specialty clamps, there were wooden clothespins. They lived in laundry rooms, kitchen drawers, porches, and basement shelves. And when a small piece of trim, veneer, toy, frame, or household object needed to be held while glue dried, a clothespin often became the clamp. It was not meant for heavy work. It did not pretend to replace a proper woodworking clamp. But for small repairs, it gave just enough pressure to keep two little pieces from wandering apart. There is something very old home about that idea. A laundry object became a workshop object for 10 minutes, then went back to being a laundry object. The house was not divided into sealed departments. The kitchen helped the garage. The basement helped the pantry. The junk drawer helped everybody. That flexibility is hard to see in a modern home full of products designed for one use and one use only. The clothespin clamp reminds us that old household competence was often just imagination plus restraint. Use the small thing for the small job, and know where the small job ends. Number 18. The tissue paper draft hunt. Old homes breathed. Sometimes that was good. Sometimes, in January, it was a problem you could feel around your ankles. Before thermal cameras and plastic window kits, many fathers used the lightest thing in the house to find a draft: a strip of tissue paper, a thin thread, or even a dry hand held patiently near the window frame. The idea was simple. Do not guess where the cold air is coming from. Let the house show you. A little flutter near a sash, door frame, baseboard, or old keyhole told the story faster than complaining about the whole room. Once the draft was found, the answer could be modest: a door snake, rope caulk, weather stripping, a tightened latch, or a note for a warmer Saturday repair. The important part was the hunt. Old homeowners understood that comfort came from dozens of small observations. They did not always have money for new windows. They had attention. And attention, spread across a whole house, could make winter feel less cruel. Pause the count for a moment. Look at what these first 8 tricks have in common. Not one began with a shopping cart. Not one began with a phone call. Not one treated the house like a sealed object that only a stranger could understand. They all began with someone slowing down long enough to notice friction, looseness, movement, air, or wear. That is the part that disappeared. The wax, the soap, the chalk, the shim, the coffee can, those were just tools. The deeper skill was the habit of seeing a house as something alive enough to answer back. A sticky drawer told you about dryness. A dragging door told you about pressure. A cold draft told you where the outside was sneaking in. Number 17. The bar soap window track. Old wooden windows had moods. In humid weather they swelled. After a bad paint job they stuck. In winter they could feel like they had made a private decision never to move again. An old father did not always attack the window. He checked first. Was it painted shut? Was the sash damaged? Was the frame swollen? Was it a safety window that needed proper attention? Anything serious or unsafe belonged to a careful repair. But when the trouble was simple friction on a wooden track, a little dry bar soap or wax could help the sash move again. The same idea as the drawer, but in a place where weather, paint, and dust had been fighting the wood for years. Old homeowners knew that forcing a window could crack glass, damage trim, or make a small problem bigger. They eased things. They coaxed. They understood that a window was a working part of the house. That is why number 17 belonged in so many family memories. It was a small fix with a large lesson. Never fight wood before you understand why it is stuck. Number 16. The felt pad chair saver. In many old dining rooms, the chairs told on the children. Every scrape across the floor left a mark. Every careless push away from the table made a noise that seemed twice as loud in a quiet house. Before packages of perfect furniture pads appeared everywhere, fathers made their own. Felt from an old hat, thick cloth, cork, leather scraps, or a small bit of worn material could be shaped and fixed under a chair leg to protect the floor. Hardwood floors were not treated as disposable surfaces. They were part of the house's dignity. People swept them, waxed them, covered them with rugs, and tried not to gouge them with every chair movement. This trick worked because it looked ahead. The chair was not broken yet. The floor was not ruined yet. The father was preventing damage before it became a repair. That is a forgotten category of home wisdom, quiet prevention. Modern repair culture often starts when something fails. Old household culture often started when someone noticed what was about to fail. Number 15. The vinegar mineral wipe. Around faucets, old sinks, and basement wash tubs, hard water could leave a pale crust that made everything look neglected. Many families kept vinegar in the kitchen for cooking, cleaning, and small household chores. For surface mineral stains, it was a familiar old helper. A vinegar-dampened rag could soften some of that white buildup around a fixture or on a glass jar used near water. This was never supposed to be a miracle cure, and it was not a plumbing repair. It was surface care. And today, it comes with an important rule: never mix vinegar with bleach or other cleaners, and do not use it on materials that can be damaged by acid. But as a piece of household history, it shows something important. Older families understood ordinary materials. Vinegar reacted with mineral deposits. It had limits. It belonged in a home where people knew the difference between cleaning a stain and fixing a pipe. That difference mattered. A lot of modern products sell certainty in bright bottles. The old way required judgment. Vinegar helped because someone knew what kind of problem they were looking at. Number 14. The sawdust and glue nick filler. Old furniture gathered scars. A chair leg hit the wall. A drawer corner chipped. A workbench got nicked by a tool. A small gouge appeared in a wooden surface that was too good to throw away and not damaged enough to rebuild. In many garages, the answer began with the dust from the same kind of wood. Fine sawdust mixed with glue could become a simple filler for small nicks in ordinary household wood. It was not fine cabinet making. It was not invisible restoration. But it could soften the damage and keep a small wound from becoming the only thing anyone saw. The trick came from a world where material was respected. Sawdust was not always trash. Sometimes it was the color of the repair. Today, fillers come in tubs, tubes, colors, and kits. Many are excellent. But the old version taught a deeper lesson. The best repair understands what the thing is made of. Wood repaired with wood. Metal saved with metal. Cloth patched with cloth. The house made more sense when people thought that way. Number 13. The jar lid parts tray. One of the easiest ways to ruin a simple repair is to lose the tiny screw. Every father knew that. So before opening a latch, a hinge, a lamp base, a drawer pull, or a little household mechanism, many old-timers reached for a jar lid, saucer, tobacco tin, or shallow can. Every screw went into it. Every washer went into it. Every little part stayed where the eye could find it. This sounds too simple to count as a trick. That is exactly why it mattered. A house is full of small pieces. Lose one, and a 10-minute job becomes an afternoon of crawling on the floor. The jar lid parts tray kept order inside the mess. There was discipline in it. The old father did not trust luck. He made a place for the pieces before the pieces existed. Modern tools are better in many ways, but many modern repairs still fail from the same old mistake. disassembly without memory. The jar lid was memory, sitting on the workbench. Number 12. The washer rattle cure. Old homes were full of small rattles. A loose handle. A metal hook tapping against wood. A cabinet pull that clicked every time the drawer closed. A screen door part with a little too much play. These were not disasters, but they made a house sound tired. Old fathers often cured rattles with the smallest piece of cushioning or spacing they had: a washer, a bit of rubber, a scrap of leather, a piece cut from an old inner tube, or a felt circle saved from something else. The purpose was simple: put a little quiet between two hard surfaces. Again, this was for small household rattles, not machinery, wiring, appliances, or safety systems. The old-timers knew that a harmless noise and a dangerous noise were not the same thing. But when it was harmless, they hated living with it. A house deserved to sound cared for. That is a beautiful idea. Silence was not bought. It was made, one tiny washer at a time. Number 11. The tightening before replacing habit. This may be the least glamorous trick on the list, and one of the most important. Before replacing a handle, latch, hinge, knob, hook, chair, shelf, or cabinet part, old fathers checked whether it was simply loose. Not broken. Loose. That difference saved countless household objects. A drawer pull that wobbled for 3 months could damage the wood around it. A chair rung that shifted could become a bigger break. A latch that clicked poorly could wear the strike plate. A hinge that sagged could make a door drag and lead someone to blame the whole door. Tightening was maintenance before drama. The old Saturday morning walk through a house often included a screwdriver in the back pocket. A father would notice a knob, give it a careful turn, test it, and move on. Modern life waits for failure because failure is loud. Old household competence listened while the problem was still whispering. That is why tightening before replacing deserves a place near the middle of this list. It is almost too obvious now, which is how forgotten wisdom often hides. Stop again and look at the pattern. The old American home was not held together by one heroic repair. It was held together by hundreds of small corrections made before they became emergencies. A father did not need to be a master carpenter to care for a house. He needed to notice the drawer before it broke, the chair before it gouged the floor, and the window before it stuck completely. That is the real contrast with modern replacement culture. Today, many people are taught to ignore a thing until it fails, then replace the whole assembly. The old way was slower, but it created a different relationship with the home. The person living inside the house was also one of the people responsible for understanding it. Number 10. The labeled touch-up jar. Old fathers knew that paint did not stay in the can forever, but memory faded even faster. When a room was painted, a little leftover paint often went into a small jar, labeled by room, color, and date. Kitchen trim. Back bedroom. Hallway. Porch rail. Sometimes the label was masking tape. Sometimes it was written directly on the lid with a pencil or marker. Months later, when a chair scraped the wall or a picture frame left a mark, that small jar saved the room. The genius was not the paint. It was the label. Without the label, every leftover can becomes a mystery. With the label, a tiny repair stays tiny. A scuff does not become a weekend project. A chipped corner does not require repainting the whole wall. Many homes lost this habit because products became easier to buy than records were to keep. The old label jar says something kind about the past. People expected the house to need care later, so they left a note for their future selves. Number 9. The scrapwood story stick. Long before everyone trusted a tape measure for every repeated cut or spacing mark, old handymen used a story stick. It was just a scrap of wood marked with the measurements that mattered for one job. Shelf spacing. Cabinet handle positions. Fence picket gaps. A row of hooks in the mudroom. The stick carried the story of the job so the numbers did not have to be remembered again and again. It reduced mistakes by turning measurement into a physical memory. Instead of measuring the same distance 15 times and risking 15 small errors, the father made one careful mark and repeated it. A story stick was not fancy. It might get tossed into the corner after the job. But for the length of that repair, it was better than confidence. It was consistency. Old homes are full of things that look simple because someone cared, made a mark, and followed it. The story stick reminds us that skill is often less about doing something dramatic and more about making fewer mistakes. Number 8. The stitch screen patch. A torn screen used to be treated like a reparable thing. In summer, when mosquitoes found every weakness in a porch or window screen, a father did not always replace the whole panel. For a small tear, families sometimes stitched the screen with fine wire, thread, or a small patch of matching screen material. It was not invisible. That was not the point. The point was to keep the bugs out and keep the window useful. Screen repair belonged to the old seasonal rhythm of a house. In spring, you looked at windows, doors, frames, screens, latches, and porch furniture. You fixed what winter had loosened. You prepared the house for the next kind of weather. Today, people often jump straight from damage to replacement. Sometimes replacement is right. But the old stitched patch carried a different assumption. A small tear deserves a small answer. Not every repair has to erase the past. Sometimes it only has to let the house keep doing its job. Number 7. The block of wood soft tap. If something needed persuading, an old father usually put a scrap of wood between the hammer and the house. That little block protected trim, furniture, drawer parts, cabinet pieces, and small wooden assemblies from the full anger of a steel hammer. Instead of leaving a dent, the block spread the force. Instead of making one ugly mark, it gave the part a gentler push. This was the difference between forcing and persuading. Tools are powerful, and power without restraint damages what it means to fix. The block of wood soft tap was common because old garages were full of scraps. A short offcut from last year's shelf could help repair this year's drawer. Nothing had only one life. That is the Homecraft idea in miniature. Use what is near. Protect the material. Move slowly enough that the repair does not create a new scar. Number 6. The wax saw and plane sole. Old tool care was home repair before the repair began. A hand saw that dragged through wood made every job harder. A hand plane that stuck and skipped could turn a simple smoothing job into a fight. Fathers who used hand tools often kept wax nearby, not just for drawers and windows, but for the tools themselves. A little wax on the saw plate or the sole of a plane helped the tool move smoothly. Less friction meant cleaner work and less fatigue. It also meant the person doing the job was less tempted to force the tool. The old workshop taught that a cared-for tool made a calmer worker. A dull, dragging tool made impatience. And impatience is where bad repairs begin. Today, many tools are faster and more powerful. But the old lesson still has weight. Before blaming the wood, check the tool. Before pushing harder, make the tool ready. The fathers of the 1960s did not always say it out loud, but their workbenches did. Number 5. The rope caulk winter seal. Before every house had modern replacement windows, there was rope caulk. It came in coils or strips, soft enough to press into small gaps around old windows when winter started pushing cold air through the room. Families used it because it was temporary, simple, and removable when the season changed. The deeper trick was seasonal thinking. Old homeowners understood that a house had different jobs in October than it had in June. Windows that needed to open in spring might need help sealing in January. A draft that felt harmless in September could make a child avoid a whole corner of the room by Christmas. Rope caulk was not a cure for rotten frames, unsafe windows, or serious damage. It was a modest answer to a modest seasonal gap. That kind of modesty was common in old home care. Not every problem was inflated into a project. The old father walked around before the cold settled in and asked a practical question. Where will this house lose warmth when the wind comes? Then he did something small before the weather did something big. Number 4. The proud nail check. Old wood floors, stairs, porch boards, and trim had a way of revealing the tiny nails that worked themselves upward over time. A proud nail was not dramatic. It might catch a sock, snag a mop, scratch a chair leg, or make a faint click underfoot. But old fathers noticed these things. A small nail sticking up was a small warning from the house. For ordinary trim or non-structural household wood, the old response was simple: seat the nail properly before it caused damage. The important part was not the tap itself. The important part was seeing the problem early and knowing whether it was a harmless maintenance issue or a sign of something bigger. On stairs, porches, decks, or any place where safety might be involved, modern caution matters. Loose boards, structural movement, or repeated nail movement deserve proper repair. But in the small, safe places of a house, the proud nail check was another example of attention. The father walking through the room heard the click. He felt the snag. He saw the little shine of metal and fixed it before anyone else thought to complain. Before the top 3, remember what this list has really been about. It has not been about pretending the past was perfect. Old houses had drafts. Old tools rusted. Old fathers made mistakes. Some repairs should have been handled by professionals even then. But the best part of that old culture is worth saving. People used to believe that a home was knowable. A drawer had a reason for sticking. A window had a reason for dragging. A floor had a reason for squeaking. The house was not a mystery box. It was a system of wood, metal, air, moisture, habit, and time. The last 3 tricks are less about one object and more about the way a capable household thought. Number 3. The Saturday hinge check. In many homes, Saturday morning had a sound, a screwdriver turning somewhere down the hall. Doors were opened and closed. Cabinet hinges were tested. A loose screw got attention before the door sagged. A latch was watched to see if it met the strike plate cleanly. A squeak was heard before it became the voice of the whole room. The old hinge check was not about rebuilding doors. It was about catching movement while it was still small. Houses shift. Wood moves. Children swing on doors even after being told not to. Cabinets are opened 1,000 times. Hardware loosens because life keeps touching it. An old father understood that hardware was not installed once and forgotten forever. It was part of the living maintenance of the home. Again, judgment mattered. Exterior doors, security doors, damaged frames, or structural problems are not casual fixes. But ordinary interior hardware often stayed healthy because someone gave it 5 minutes before it demanded 5 hours. That was the Saturday hinge check. A small ritual of responsibility, hidden inside the sound of a screwdriver. Number 2. The basement shelf of saved materials. There was a shelf in many old basements that looked like nonsense to outsiders. Short boards. A coffee can of nails. A jar of washers. A half roll of screen. A piece of weather stripping. A strip of felt. A hinge from a cabinet long gone. A bit of sandpaper. A pencil. A folded paper bag full of small scraps. To a modern eye, it could look like clutter. To the house, it was insurance. That shelf meant a repair did not have to wait for a perfect product. It meant a father could patch a screen, shim a cabinet, protect a floor, label a jar, replace a missing washer, or test an idea without leaving the house. The shelf also taught children something without saying it directly. Materials still had value after the first job. A leftover board was not trashed the moment the shelf was built. A screw was not useless because it came from an old hinge. The basement shelf was the opposite of disposable culture. It said, keep what is still useful, remember where you put it, and give ordinary things another chance to serve. Number 1. The 5-minute look before spending money. The most forgotten home repair trick every father knew in the 1960s was not wax, soap, vinegar, chalk, or a coffee can full of screws. It was the 5-minute look. Before buying, replacing, calling, blaming, or throwing away, he looked. He pulled the drawer out and saw where it rubbed. He opened and closed the door slowly. He listened to the hinge. He checked whether the screw was loose or the wood was split. He felt for the draft. He looked at the old part before deciding it was dead. That 5-minute look saved drawers, windows, chairs, tools, floors, and family budgets. More than that, it kept a relationship alive between the people and the place they lived. A home that receives no attention becomes a collection of products waiting to fail. A home that receives attention becomes something closer to a partner. The old fathers were not always experts. Many were machinists, farmers, mail carriers, factory workers, salesmen, veterans, and men who had learned by watching someone older. What they shared was not perfection. It was willingness. They were willing to look. Think back to that Ohio kitchen in 1963. The drawer stuck. The coffee smelled strong. The children were getting ready for school. A father took a stub of wax from the drawer, gave the wood a little help, slid the drawer back into place, and the morning continued. No one wrote it down. No one called it wisdom. But it was. Because the video was never really about drawer wax, soap screws, folded shims, or coffee cans. It was about a time when ordinary people carried a working map of their homes in their heads. They knew which window swelled after rain, which floorboard clicked in February, which jar held the right screws, and which old tool could be trusted. That knowledge did not disappear because it stopped being useful. It disappeared because homes became more specialized, products became easier to replace, and people were slowly taught that competence belonged somewhere else. In a store. In a service truck. In a sealed package. In someone else's hands. But the old value is still worth remembering. Attention. Patience. Care. The belief that a thing should be understood before it is thrown away. If this reminded you of a father, grandfather, neighbor, or old family workshop, tell us what he fixed, what tool he always kept nearby, or what trick you still remember. Because sometimes the smallest repairs carry the longest memories.